Hello everybody, Luis here, and let's talk C#. So this is if statements part 2, okay? So in the first video, I wanted to keep things simple, so I didn't really talk about if statements in too many details, but there are so many other things that you can do with if statements. There are so many other details or layers to it. So let's talk about them. So we had worked on this exercise where the user is prompt for I think they have to type in a city, and then you're supposed to collect that input, and if the city is Toronto, you're going to say one thing. If it's New York, you're going to say something different. So let's kind of work on the same problem but in a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a console write line. Please input a city. I don't remember if that's the exact phrasing that we had last time, but that's good enough for what we're doing today. And I'm going to create a new variable called city. It's a string type, and I'm going to do a console.readLine. Okay, so very simple problem, right? So the requirement was if the user types in, well, I don't remember if the requirement was exactly the same as what we're going to do today. If it's not, I'm just going to change it a little bit. It doesn't really matter because I just want to show you the concept. So if the user types in Toronto, you're going to say Toronto is a beautiful city. If the user types in New York, I think in the last video you wanted to say something different, so you would use an else if statement. So let's do that just to recap real quick. So I would do something like if city.toUpper, can't forget your toUpper or toLower methods, either one is fine. Toronto, then you open your curly braces, do a console write line. I'm gonna do my interpolated string because I love interpolated strings, and I'm gonna say something like city, not cutie, city is a beautiful city. Okay. If the user types in New York, then I'll have an else if statement, and it'll be something like city.toUpper equals oops, New York. Man, I can't type today. I'm going to say something like console write line, interpolated string. City is close to Toronto. I think that's what we said last time. And then else, finally, for every other city, I'm going to say something like I did not know that city. I think that was it. So if I run this, what's going to happen is that if the user types in Toronto, the program will respond to Toronto is a Toronto is a beautiful city. If the user types in New York, the program will respond with New York is close to Toronto. Okay. So what if I want to change this? What if I want to say include another city here, say Vancouver, right? And I want to do the exact same response. So should I just go ahead and include another else if here, if it's the same response, like else if city.toUpper equals Vancouver, and then just copy and paste what I have here? I mean, of course this works, but I mean, you're just repeating yourself, right? And there in programming, there's this principle called dry, so don't repeat yourself. So that's exactly what you're doing here, because you have these two are the exact same line of code. So that there must be a better way, and there is a better way. So something that you can do, and that's what this video is all about, is that you can create compound Boolean expressions. So how would you go about doing that? If you want to create compound Boolean expressions, you have to use Boolean operators. And there are a few of them. First one we're going to talk about is the OR operator, which most of you probably already know as pipe. And you have the AND. Okay. Another one, just to have all the basic Boolean operators here, is the NOT. So these are the Boolean operators, and I will assume that you already know what they are. You are familiar with logical circuits. If you're not, now would be a good time to pause this video and go learn this. So do your research before we move on. But if you don't want to do that, we're gonna have a quick crash course on this thing in this video. So if you want to learn it more in depth, there's not too much to learn. But if you want to, you can pause this video now, go do your research, and come back later. If you want to just have a crash course on it, that's great as well. So let's do that. So let's say that I want to change the requirement for this. So what I want to do is I want to add Vancouver. So if the user types in Toronto or Vancouver, I want to have this output. Okay, so listen to this. The requirement is if the user types in Toronto or Vancouver. So in plain English, you already know what kind of operator you have to use, right? It has to be the OR operator. Okay, or city.toUpper equals Vancouver, right? So the way this works is that if the user types in Toronto or types in Vancouver, we're gonna fall in this if statement. Okay, so that's how this works. All right, so in plain English, you already know what kind of Boolean operator you will have to use. Okay, now remember that this is a compound Boolean expression, and essentially this is just a fancy name. Okay, what that means is that you're gonna have one Boolean expression here, okay, and you're gonna have another Boolean expression here, and that's why they're compound expressions, because there's more than one. You can have as many as you need, although having too many is considered to be bad practice. But essentially it means that you have two parts to this Boolean expression, all right? And these parts are glued together with Boolean operators, okay? Note that I'm talking about Boolean operators and not comparison operators, okay? So equals, this is a comparison operator, okay? And that you use comparison operators to create Boolean expressions, just the way you're doing here. But you use Boolean operators to create compound Boolean expressions. Okay? So if this is not clear, you can leave a comment down below and I will try to explain a little clearer, or you can just shoot me an email and I will try to explain it in more detail. But essentially this is this is all there is to it. Okay, so if I run this code, so this is the same code from the last video, so I kind of already know what it does, so I won't bother typing in Toronto or New York. I want to cut to the cheese and just say Vancouver. And if I do that, the response is Vancouver is a beautiful city, which is exactly what I'm hoping for, right? So my compound Boolean expression here works, which is great. Let's work on a different exercise, just because there's something else I want to show you. So let's say I'm working on this program that has to check if a number is between 10 and 50. Okay, so I gotta have an if statement there, and it has to check, is this number greater than 10 and less than 50. Okay, so there are many ways that you can do that. So I won't collect this number from the user this time because you probably already know how to do that. So I'll just create an int variable here. I'm going to call this number. And I'm going to say this is 25. Okay, so let's create an if statement here. And I'm going to have to throw in some condition in here. And then if that's the case, what I'm going to say is number is between 10 and 50. Okay, cool. So how do I do that now? I have to compare if this number is between 10 and 50. So that's pretty simple from the last video. Hopefully you already know this. If number is greater than 10, so yeah, so that would give me a number that is greater than 10. However, does not necessarily give me checks if my number is less than 50, right? So if I run this, yep, I will get the output I'm hoping for. So 25 is between 10 and 50, although I do have a typo here. Okay. But let's say if this number is 100 and I run this, I mean, it's saying that 100 is between 10 and 50, so, which is clearly not the case. So what do I have to do here now? I have to throw in a second Boolean expression, right? So this if statement has to have a compound Boolean expression. So this number, it has to be between 10 and 50. In other words, it has to be greater than 10 and lower than 50. So I can throw in my AND operator. Number is less than 50. Okay, so again, in plain English, that already tells you the operator you have to use, because your number has to be greater than 10 and your number has to be less than 50. Okay, so a very common mistake here for people who are learning how to program is that they forget this part and then just say something like number is greater than 10 and less than 50. So this is syntactically wrong. Even Visual Studio will tell you that. So you do have to include the entire Boolean expression here, okay, for this to work. Yeah, so I think we have everything we need. So if I run this, let me just throw in an else statement here just so I can have a separate output for this. Gonna do the same thing. Number is not between 10 and 50. Okay, so if I run this, I get 100 is not between 10 and 50, which is correct. Now, if I were to replace this with 15 and run this, beautiful, look at that. 15 is between 10 and 50, which is exactly what I'm looking for. You do have to be careful with the boundaries though, okay? So if I run this, note that number being less than 10 is not the same as being less than or equal to 10, okay? So if this number is 10, what is the output? Do you know? I hope you know. So 10 is not between 10 and 50. That's because the comparison operator that I'm using here is just greater than and not greater than or equal to. Okay, so something to be careful about. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Cheers.